Pretty strange, like I think we sort of said it would be, just like everything is this year. There's obviously, getting in and out of the building is a little bit different. Everyone's wearing masks. There's social distancing. There's COVID testing, mandatory COVID testing to get into certain committee hearings, things like that. So all of that, like I think we've discussed in the past, has kind of slowed the pace a little bit of the session generally up to this point. That having been said, this was really the week when I think things have started to pick up a bit, pick up pace. We're starting to see committees in the House certainly meeting a little more regularly with longer agendas. The first couple major House calendars with bills were starting to be heard just last week. So things are kind of returning to form a bit. We are slowly kind of seeing, the number of people in the Capitol who are vaccinated increase, and so it's starting to kind of feel slowly, kind of returning to a bit more of a normal form, but very slowly, obviously. So in kind of preparing for this tonight, I wanted to go over some items that we had sort of talked about in the past, and just kind of highlight where we are on a few of these points. I'll just kind of preview them real quickly. MD-PhD issue, a bill that Dr. Clark has been very active in. Telemedicine, there's been a lot of activity there as well. Medical marijuana, issues of scope of practice, this new proposed Brain Institute of Texas research fund and bonding authority that's going to be discussed soon. And then another issue that I don't think we've had much time to discuss, although we had some questions about it from a number of doctors that reached out to me. Senate Bill 207, it's called regarding the paid and incurred statute for those physicians that maybe work in personal injury or treating patients who've been injured in like trucking accidents. There's some pretty substantial legislation that's going through that may have an impact on those practices as well. So I'll give kind of an overview of all of this, and hopefully I'll be able to answer questions at the end if folks have some. But I'll try not to linger too long on any one topic. So feel free to. I think Kai mentioned this. If you guys have questions, I think just enter them into the chat, and we'll get to them all at the end. So first things first. As I mentioned, we had kind of a busy day today, actually, this morning on a couple of these fronts. Senate Bill 1414 by Senator Joan Huffman from the Houston area, which is a bill that TNS and Baylor College of Medicine have kind of been active in pursuing. Really, Dr. Clark, like I mentioned, has been kind of the driving force behind this change. Essentially, is a bill to help those physicians who also choose to pursue a PhD, physician scientists. The law right now, for those of you that have kind of been on these calls or discussions before, may recall this, that the law as it stands right now offers some hurdles to doctors in this pretty challenging environment, which limits their ability to take all their necessary boards and become practicing physicians and of course scientists, all in a defined period of time. Right now, there's a time limit of really 10 years. The bill is going to change that to either the shorter of 12 years or whenever the individual completes their graduate medical training. This bill was laid out this morning, early this morning in Senate Health and Human Services. Senator Huffman did an incredible job, very succinctly kind of laying out the issue, discussing it with the members. There wasn't a lot of feedback or discussion. I hope, based on the movements I've made around the Senate to the different committee members, there's not a lot of concern over the issue. I think it's pretty non-controversial, hopefully. There were two physicians that were there to discuss the bill. Dr. Daniel Callum, who's an MD PhD from Baylor College of Medicine, who's a pediatric neurologist. Dr. Jason Gill, another MD PhD there as well. Both did a great job kind of providing backup information to Senator Huffman. So went well, successful, a relatively brief hearing, I'd say. I unfortunately was indisposed. I was in the House Public Health hearing at the time, and so I wasn't able to be in the room. But I was kind of watching it on my phone with my earplugs in. That's the kind of that's when you can tell you're getting into a real part of session, when you're trying to do 2 committee hearings at once. So had that this morning. It went really well. I've gone around and kind of checked again with the committee members. There's really no concerns or objections that have been offered, and so we're hopeful after speaking with the clerk for Senate Health and Human Services. He let me know that he's expecting they're going to hold a vote probably next week to vote that out. And if they have no objections, they will most certainly send it to the Senate uncontested calendar, which is, for those who aren't familiar, it basically just kind of skips the floor. It's kind of a nominal vote that people take where they kind of vote everything at once for issues that are not deemed controversial. So hopefully we'll see that soon, and it'll be heading over to the House, where Dr. Oliverson from the Tomball area will be picking up the bill. Interestingly, to us, Dr. Austin's son, John Michael, is working on the bill, so it's in good hands. I think it'll be just fine when it gets over to the House as well. Dr. Oliverson's a great author there as well. So feel good. We kind of got out ahead of the crush here a little bit, and so I feel confident that bill's going to be on a good path. Dr. Clark was in the room there. I just wanted to kind of say, and I know that I wasn't planning to call on you, Dr. Clark, but I mean, is there anything you wanted to add to that before we kind of move on to the next thing?
No, I think the witnesses today were really quite well spoken, and I think really painted the picture of the MD PhD plight in Texas. And we've got other MD PhDs at other institutions that are having similar things, and we've got support from those institutions as well. So I'm hopeful this gets fixed. It'd be great.
Yeah, well said. I think like you said, I think it seems to be an easy problem. I mean, nothing's easy, but it seems to be the kind of problem that I think that at least the members I've spoken to seem to kind of wonder why it's something we need to fix in the first place. They think it seems common sense. It seems like something we want to do to encourage the best and brightest, obviously, to stay here in Texas and continue, pursuing that path. So good report on that. I think we'll know a little bit more about where that goes in the coming days. The next real quick update today, again, kind of a timely discussion we're having today on the subject of telemedicine. One of the major priority pieces of legislation for the House of Representatives this session is House Bill 4, which is authored by my old boss, Representative For Price from Amarillo, Republican from Amarillo. It's kind of a catch-all telemedicine bill. We could get kind of into the details about every little piece of it. Suffice it to say that it's basically taking all of the different waivers to telemedicine law that were enacted during the pandemic. Some of which we've discussed at length here about different programs that weren't previously allowed to use telemedicine, or the relaxation of things like requiring a synchronous video interaction like we're having here, and just maybe doing an audio only interaction for certain telehealth encounters. It basically puts those things which many of you practitioners have used and patients have become comfortable with, kind of puts that into law permanently. That was a bill that was heard this morning in House Public Health. And it's obviously, like I said, going to be picked up by. We will be expected to be voted out this next week, and will be a priority item for the House of Representatives. So will be kind of advanced to the major state calendar, which is kind of one of the where they put all the kind of top issues for the House of Representatives. After that passes, it'll go over to the Senate, where Dr. Don Buckingham will be picking that up as well. So something else for those of you that are interested in telemedicine that kind of captures really everything that's been changed over the pandemic.
Hey, Tom, do you get a sense of who's against it? Do you have a sense of who is against it? I mean,
yeah, I listened to some of the opening testimony. Didn't hear anybody, kind of come out registered against it. I'll go back and review and see if anyone registered against it. I didn't hear anyone speak against it. I can't, can't think of, somebody that would be, just in the kind of conversations I've had about the bill so far. I think basically it's a good bit of work that Representative Price has done to kind of get all the stakeholders on the same page about it. So I anticipate it'll ultimately go through, become law. We can kind of do a good deep dive, at the end of session after it's kind of gone through its various iterations. And once we kind of know what the final product looks like, hopefully we'll be able to kind of do an education about the changing face of telemedicine as it kind of continues to evolve. So moving on, so that was just this morning. So a busy morning so far for TNS today. We've got a couple things coming up actually tomorrow. Let me kind of skip down my list here to something that we've just started discussing, some emails back and forth between myself and Dr. Clark and Dr. Austin about House Bill 15. So here again, when you hear all these House Bill 4, House Bill 15, these are all kind of what they consider sort of held bill numbers. These are bill numbers that are signed by the Speaker himself. It's usually everything below kind of 50, is the mark. So House Bill 15 is a bill by Representative Synfronia Thompson from Houston, Democrat from Houston. She's the longest serving woman in the Texas House of Representatives. I think she was elected in 1970. Certainly the longest serving African-American woman in Texas history, I believe. And she's filed this bill to create the Brain Institute of Texas, or the Brain Research Institute of Texas. In a nutshell, it's easy to describe. It's probably easier to describe to those of you who are familiar with the secret program or secret legislation that was enacted, I think, probably 10 or 15 years ago now, to create the Cancer Prevention and Research Institute of Texas. Essentially, what that was, it still exists now, was basically a bit of legislation and a bond authority that was passed in the legislature that was then voted on by the people of Texas to authorize a certain allocation of bonds that the state could use to issue grants for basically drawing in the best and brightest cancer doctors from all over the world, or using it with institutions of higher education, research institutions, a lot of them in Houston, in the medical center, to help advance cancer research. So similar concept, but this is about really conditions affecting the brain and brain science, and putting a similar effort towards that. Basically is I think the best way to kind of describe the concept. I wrote a little bit of a note from the bill itself. I'm sorry, my eyes are failing me here, guys. Proposed, to expedite innovation in brain research, enhance the potential for medical or scientific breakthrough in brain-related science, to attract, create, expand research capabilities in higher education by awarding grants to institutions that promote brain research. So bill is going to be heard tomorrow in the House Higher Education Committee. It's actually two pieces of legislation: House Bill 15 and House Joint Resolution 5. House Joint Resolution 5 basically is the language that they're going to use when they propose this to the voters. Ultimately, House Resolution 5 will have to be passed by the voters. It would authorize, if it was passed by the legislature and ultimately passed by the voters, it would authorize the state of Texas to issue up to $5 billion in bond authority that they could then use for grants that they would distribute to basically institutions of higher education in Texas, research hospitals, and other kind of affiliated partners to, again, promote brain research and brain science. So tomorrow at 8 a.m. I've already spoken to the chair of higher education, House Higher Education. He was actually another former boss of mine, Jim Murphy, from the Houston area. I ran his re-election campaign in 2010, And so I went by to visit him and just kind of catch up with him and asked him about this bill. And he said, obviously, he's very supportive, and he thinks they'll be able to get it out of the House committee. He did tell me, and I think he's probably not wrong, though, that this kind of a project, though, I think is pretty noble, and I think it would be a great thing to do. He said is not completely uncontroversial, and candidly, it may face a little bit of a tough climb if they're able to get it out of the House. It may face a bit of a tougher climb in the Texas Senate. Just historically, they've had more philosophical problems with these kinds of programs that allow for really big bonding authority for projects, which, like I say, I think that are certainly noble. This would be a great thing if we could get this done. But there's a lot of attitude, I think, from some of the members, conservative members in the Texas Senate, that this is a bit of a departure from the real traditional role of government. And so that's kind of what we're going to fight, I think, on that side. I'm going to work on the House side. I'll be there tomorrow to register the Neurological Society in favor of the bill. I'm not planning to speak on the bill. I don't think that's necessary, but I've told the author we'll do whatever we can to help her advance that bill through the House and then on to the Senate. So something to keep our eyes on. I think it would be a pretty interesting, certainly for those of our members that work in academic research. It'd be obviously a great thing to see that come to pass. Dr. Clark, I know it's something else that we had some discussion about. Anything you wanted to add to that too?
Well, as I get older, I have a vested interest in the success of this thing. If we're going to find cures for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, in addition to all the child neurological disorders, we're going to have physician scientists, and we're going to have an infrastructure that's conducive to fostering research. At a time that the NIH is probably not going to be able to support all the innovations that we need in neurology, it is going to be states that have the foresight like this and these kind of programs that are going to be able to really move things to the next level. So I'm very excited about it. I know Huda Zogby is going to testify written testimony tomorrow. So we really would like to see this go forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. I think, like I said, we'll this may be a little tougher than the something like the MD PhD bill, which isn't going to be spending $5 billion. But we're gonna put our shoulder to it, and we're gonna see if we can help push this over the top as well. And so we'll have updates on this, I guess, as the session goes forward as well. So just something else we're kind of actively keeping our eyes towards. A few other kind of points just to hit on briefly, and then we'll kind of open it up to questions. I don't have too much more to discuss here. Scope, I know, is something that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Let me take a break real quick. I just want to recognize Amy Garza. Amy, I think you're the first neurologist I know of that runs the office.
Oh, thank you.
So I think that's great. And I'm so glad you're tuning in. It's nice to talk to you. And I know the TNA supported you, and we hope you run again. And anyways.
We'll see. Right now, I'm just holding steady and trying to pay attention to what's going on. But I appreciate the shout out. Thank you.
It's good to see you.
Dr. Garza, good to see you again. I didn't even see you pop on there. So good to see you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just kind of run through a couple kind of quicker updates that in some cases we have a little less going on, frankly. In one case that's good, in one case it's probably not so good. The issue of medical marijuana and medical cannabis is something we've kind of discussed a lot during these updates. Obviously, there's a fair degree of interest from the members of TNS about this and kind of where it's heading. Hate to say it, but it looks like so far in this session it is not heading anywhere quickly. Not to say it couldn't happen next week, but they have not. There's been a bevy of bills filed in the House and Senate, really mostly by Democratic members, to be fair, and they have yet to have a hearing on any of them so far. Doesn't mean they won't, but the understanding I have from kind of the House Public Health Committee chair and the who's a Republican, and the Senate Health and Human Services Committee staff is that The Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, is kind of, even though there's some interest, I think, from members sort of organically about this, the Lieutenant Governor has kind of put out the kibosh on new expansion of cannabis law in Texas. He's kind of quietly said, yeah, we've gone, we've made some steps, we've made some incremental changes over the last few years, and I'm going no farther, is kind of how he's put it. So he said that in the past, and he's kind of ended up, going back on it, depending on, which bill it is and who's authoring it. But for the moment, that seems to be kind of freezing things up. And obviously, as I mentioned at the outset, I think this is kind of a weird session because it's due to some of the logistical struggles, right? We're having fewer committee hearings and kind of fewer bills heard when we have committee hearings. They're really trying to avoid having people stuck in a confined space for 18 hours in a day. And so that is kind of making people, I think a little harder about kind of how useful it is to have a committee hearing on something that, even if they have the votes in the committee, it's just not going to, it's not going to go anywhere in the Senate. So I think it's kind of making people, do those sorts of evaluations. So it's not to say that we won't see something ultimately be heard in one of the, the House or Senate, and not even to say that it may not make it to the floor eventually, but I think there's a bit of people are being a little more choosy about kind of what bills are going to kind of make it through at this point. So nothing much to report on that front for the moment. There is a little bit to report on scope. I know this is something that again has been something that's interesting to everyone here. There's a few different bills, not too many so far. Again, it's just kind of starting to pick up now. We will probably see some more in the weeks ahead, but a few different pieces of legislation that have been offered up in committee. Most notably, the APRN, independent practice bill, which has been filed in the House by Representative Stephanie Click, who is a nurse herself, and filed in the Senate by Chairman Kelly Hancock, who leads the Senate Business and Commerce Committee, which is where that bill has also been referred. It's interesting because despite the two committee chairs carrying this bill, which I think gave people initially a lot of, at least in TMA circles, a lot of kind of consternation that this was going to really speed through. The bill for APRN independent practice was heard in Representative Click's committee last week, and is last Wednesday actually, and we were kind of watching it today to see if it was going to get voted out, and was not. There's some question. I think I'm kind of still working with TMA on this and trying to kind of keep it locked up. It looks like she may not have the votes quite yet to get the bill out of her own committee, which is kind of interesting. I know Dr. Oliverson, who I've already mentioned, is on the committee. I know he's been working hard kind of with his colleagues and his members to do what he can to kind of keep that bottled up. So we'll see. Like I said, things can change quickly. People can have their minds changed by the chair of their own committee all the time. It happens a lot. But for the moment, at least, it looks like this is going to be a little tougher for Representative Click than I think she had hoped for. And the companion bill for the APRNs in the Senate has not yet been called for a hearing. So I don't know what to make of that, but they're not moving as quick as I think we might have thought. The PT direct access bill, again, probably not something that is going to be of terrible concern to us as much as maybe others. House Bill 1363 by Ina Minchares from San Antonio was probably the only, I guess, what we'd call scope bill that was voted out of committee so far. That was voted out last week. It's going to be heading to the House Calendars Committee. I think, again, like all of these bills affecting scope of practice do, I think it's going to have a hard road to hoe. I think probably getting through calendars and then ultimately onto the House floor. Although this PT direct access issue is one that I think has been pretty thoroughly kicked around and negotiated to this point. I'm not sure it's quite as damaging or egregious as like the APRN bill certainly would be. So finally, the chiropractors have their standard bill. that they have filed every session. It's in the both the House filed by Representative Stevenson, Phil Stevenson, and in the Senate filed by Senator Charles Perry. They have managed to not have it called for hearing in either House or Senate so far. Here again, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
Was that the one for adding neuro to their name?
It is, yeah, and that's what I was going to say. It's kind of an interesting situation in that the Supreme Court case, which I think some of you are familiar with. We discussed on the last time. I think we had a discussion about all this. The Supreme Court case between the chiropractors and the Texas Medical Association, the Chiropractic Board of the Texas Medical Association, which has been working its way through the courts for just a bit over a decade now, finally was decided in the Texas Supreme Court at the beginning of this year, and adversely for the Texas Medical Association. So the Supreme Court, for its purpose, has essentially endorsed the concept of neuromuscular skeletal as being the confined definition of a chiropractor's scope of practice. And so, as we've discussed previously, that it now includes specifically, I can never end up saying the vestibular or ocular Vaunt testing, but is named that certainly as part of the chiropractic scope of practice, which is obviously disconcerting. But kind of worse probably is that it has somewhat opened the door for additional diagnostic examinations and evaluations for not just for chiropractors, but potentially for other healthcare professionals not named doctor. So so there's some reason to believe perhaps that those bills are being held, and some reason to believe that they're just not being pushed at this point, because if they've kind of got what they want, there's really nothing to be gained by continuing to kind of push that through in law. So that's scope. I'm going to see if I've got anything else on my list here. Like I'm leaving something out. Yeah, go ahead.
Dr. Croft had a question about HB 194. You said it's something about making doctors get CME on cultural competence. Has that crossed your radar?
I guess not. No, I'm sorry. I'm not familiar with that. Does it? I can certainly look it up. You said HB 194.
Yeah.
Let me just see if whose bill that is real quick. Yeah, it looks like it's by Representative Sean Theory. And so, yeah, it's been filed and been referred to public health. Looks like back in it's been referred for about a month now, so hasn't been picked up yet or hasn't been assigned yet by Chair Click. But I'll certainly put that on my list to kind of keep an eye on going forward. I'm not terribly familiar with the bill, to be honest with you.
The idea is, this is Dr. Croft, if it's okay for me to speak up.
Yeah, please do.
The concern is that there's already mandates, I think, for opioid education and I want to say sex trafficking maybe. And so in order to have our licenses renewed, we have to already do these. And Representative Theory is actually my rep. And
is that right?
Once I was up there for something, I think it was actually the MOC bill, and talking with her, and she wanted to pass a bill about suicide prevention. And this was a few years ago. So, before we know it, we're going to have 12 hours of mandatory CME. And, I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
that's the concern.
Yeah.
No, I understand. I'll certainly kind of add this to my list of things to track. It's a sensitive issue, obviously, because I just pulled it up. It's a pretty short bill, but it's not about I think to your point, it's not about the merits of the bill itself. Maybe it's talking about basically giving an education on issues of implicit racial bias and things like that people may or may not be aware of, and I'm sure that's great. But to your point, yeah, it's just kind of adding one more class that is going to be required of all physicians to get their license renewed. So yeah, let me kind of make a note of that, and I'll keep an eye on that as well. But it looks like it's not moving quickly, I'd say, at this point. So yeah, my my last thing I just wanted to go over real quick, and it was something that was kind of a new issue to introduce to the group here. It's not something that probably would, at least on the surface, probably impact everybody on the call here, but the issue of physicians that work under so-called letters of protection agreements. I'm not sure how many folks here. I know it does affect some neurologists that work with accident victims and involved in some of these big trucking collisions and things like that, and work with potentially referrals from attorneys. This kind of turning into one of the potentially the really big fights of the session between the Texas Trial Lawyers Association and this group called Texans for Lawsuit Reform. If you guys aren't familiar with them, they're a large, ostensibly pro-business organization. They're basically a big Republican, political organization as well. They give a lot of money to the elected members in the legislature, and they're basically, going after the trial attorneys that they see advertising on television, Super Bowls and things like that, of them stepping off a private jet into a Rolls Royce. They think this is a big cash cow for these trial attorneys, and that may or may not be, but the way that they've decided to sort of to go after this cottage industry, so to speak, is really potentially kind of troubling for physicians, because they're really kind of targeting the doctors here. I think they're aiming for the trial lawyers, and they're unfortunately kind of hitting physicians potentially. So the bill, just not to spend a lot of time on this, but basically their allegation or their concern is that in these cases where there's some kind of a trucking accident, and a patient's been referred from a trial attorney to a physician, orthopedics or neurology. There's a lot of different specialties this kind of impacts. That basically they're alleging that physicians are severely overcharging or reporting much higher bills than they would otherwise do, to try to increase the overall settlement that's ultimately realized for the plaintiff, right? That's an easy allegation to make. It's a little harder to really settle down and prove. As you guys all know, the way that you establish your pricing and your billed charges is complex, and it's not necessarily the same depending on the payer, right? Due to the nature of these cases, it's sometimes tough because you are taking a big risk. It is kind of there's a high potential to never get paid, as you're seeing some of these folks that need to be treated. And if you are paid, it can be 2 or 3 years later, and it can be for some reduced amount than kind of what you had initially billed. So it's complex, it's complicated. The legislation has been offered up by, what's kind of interesting about it is even though it's a little bit aimed at physicians, it's kind of being offered up by a number of the doctors in the House and Senate. Dr. Schwartner is the Senate author of this bill, Senate Bill 207, and Representative Greg Bonin, who is, of course, a neurosurgeon in the Texas House. Oh, hey, baby, is offering it up in the Texas House as well. So, just to tell a bit more about the bill, basically, some of the problems I think with it is their proposed solution is basically to set or to establish a government-supported standard of what is an acceptable payment rate, to charge in these cases. And the initial bill was filed, said basically we want to introduce to the jury other evidence that they can consider, right, to show like how reasonable it is that the charges that the physician is offering for the services they provide. And the solution they asked for was to offer up Medicaid rates or Medicare rates or workers' comp rates, right? Which obviously is problematic. I don't need to tell everybody on the call. Those are obviously some of the lower payers. And as I said, with the complexities of these cases and kind of what goes into it, if that's the amount that you're likely to recoup at the end of 2 years after going through this whole litigation and everything, then nobody really would gonna do these cases much longer. And so that has obviously some concern and some impact for whether we think you know, these trial attorneys or these commercials or whatever are good. You know, as long as there's trucks on the road, there's going to be people injured in trucking accidents. And I think the question kind of is, what happens to those patients if we're gonna go down this path and make this too difficult for doctors to treat these folks. So there's a couple other, you know, substantial problems with it. I won't bore everyone with this, but there is the potential. They're kind of changing some of the civil practice in this that may open physicians to do these cases up to really extraordinary levels of discovery, potentially their private contracts, to try to get at kind of what is the price that they you know normally would charge in these cases. It can also they're making some really significant changes to the affidavit process and deposition process, and really kind of throwing away any ability to avoid a deposition as a physician. So troubling. I think we're working on it to try to see if we can get our concerns addressed. It's kind of a good news, bad news thing, because we have physicians who have filed this legislation. They are some of the only people that I think in the building that could understand the concerns here. But it is also true that, you know, a lot of the rest of the members of the legislature kind of look to these doctors to say, well, if you're okay with it, then how bad could it, you know, how bad could it be? So a challenge, and like I said, kind of shaping up to be a big potential fight going forward. Senate Bill 207, again, to continue the fact that this was kind of a busy week. This was Senator Schwartner's version of this bill, was heard in the Senate State Affairs Committee. Losing track of my committees here. Senate State Affairs Committee this Monday, and was turned into quite an event. There was about 60 physicians that showed up who do some of these LOP cases, and each one of them testified, you know, in opposition to the bill. So it went on for quite a while. That was my late night when I got back kind of late. So we'll see. I think it's been shown that, you know, there's obviously some problems with the bills from a physician standpoint. There were a number of neurologists that came and spoke, not necessarily at our invitation, but just because they'd kind of heard about the bill. A lot of orthopedic folks and other specialists that kind of deal with this a lot. So again, something that has the potential to be a big issue going forward. We're working on it right now to see if, like we say, there's maybe a way to kind of meet some compromise where we can hopefully address some of the outliers that maybe are a problem, right? If there are people that are charging egregiously or you know, treating, over-treating or over-diagnosing in some way without kind of catching up the entire practice of medicine in it as well. So
I have a question for you.
Sorry, go ahead.
Could have kind of changed the tune, but have you heard anything about Medicaid expansion? Is there any? I
have, yeah. It's tough. It kind of falls along a similar path as some of the medical marijuana stuff we said in the beginning. Unfortunately, I think it is one of these issues that just remains pretty strictly partisan. It's tough to get Republican support for it. There's been some few brave members here or there that have kind of dipped their toe in to talk about it. You know, John Zerwas did a couple of years ago and kind of paid a price for it. Sarah Davis had done it, no longer elected, you know, to office. So some of the folks that from the Republican side, who I think were the most supportive of it, are, you know, in one case retired, in the other case got defeated. So it's tough. I think that's a hard argument. It doesn't seem like there's even though the Biden administration's kind of made a sweeter and sweeter deal here for states who have not yet accepted Medicaid expansion to do so. I think it's going to have a tough road this session as well. It just doesn't seem like the political will there. Interestingly, I don't have the number in front of me, excuse me, but Representative Julie Johnson, some of you will know from I think from the Dallas from the Dallas area, certainly has filed a bill for Medicaid expansion. I know she's gotten, I think, 64 co-authors in the House, you know, for that, which is admirable. Certainly a lot of folks. I'm pretty sure they're all Democrats, but no less a feat as a result. So it's really just, I think that's the thing, is there is some support from one side, but really it just you know, trying to get the other side of the aisle to kind of come over and have a discussion about it. It's not even that I don't think there are rank and file House members or even senators that are willing to do that, But here again, I think they're kind of getting the indication from above, from the lieutenant governor, really first and foremost, and then kind of from the governor secondarily, that this is not something that that they're going to support. And so if that's the case, it's really tough to ask some of these, like Republican House members or something, to stick their neck out and sign a bill that ultimately is going to not pass.
Yeah. Have you heard anything about prior authorization bills?
There's been a number of bills related to prior authorization that have been filed. I think we're haven't seen a bunch of them get called up quite yet it would be in House Insurance. But I think, here again, the Texas Association of Health Plans is doing a pretty good job, I think, so far of kind of working the clock and kind of working the advantages they have here to try to kind of push those things down. I know it's something that, specifically, your son's probably working on, Sarah, in Dr. Oliverson's office. I know it's something that that Dr. Oliverson's concerned about, and I think we'll probably see something done on prior auth this session, but it so far has kind of been slow to get out of the gate, I think.
The bill they're working on is that one for to reduce out-of-pocket drug costs, to do we'll see, for people without insurance. They're basically going to set the state of Texas up to negotiate with a PBM to negotiate better drug prices, and and so if you don't have insurance, maybe you'll get access to the PBM negotiated price for drugs. So we'll see if it goes anywhere. He's excited about it.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Like I said, I just the reality, and I think it's familiar with the bill. I think it's a great concept. But like I said, this is just going to be one of these sessions where it's just by virtue of the fact that we're having less time to hear things and less time to kind of get them passed. It's making it easier even for good ideas to kind of to be killed if there's a committed lobby force, I suppose, behind against it. So we'll see. I have a lot of faith in Dr. Oliverson. I think he's one of the sharpest in the building, and I think if he wants to really put his shoulder to it, he can maybe get it done. But it's gonna be a fight for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's 7:45.
Hey, right on the button. I didn't think that was gonna take. Yeah.
I know.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Sure.
So one of the telemedicine issues had to do with crossing state lines, and there's a lot of states that want to be a compact that a lot of us are against. But is the telemedicine bill a chance to define the place of the encounter shall be the doctor's office, so that we can get away with not having to worry about making my Louisiana patients drive across the border to Texas to call me?
Yeah. Sorry, ask the question one more time. Is there
So right now, the definition of the place of the encounter for a telemedicine visit is where the patient lives. So it seems to me if we're expanding telemedicine, that would be a good chance for us to define that as the place of the encounter shall be the doctor's office. So that would make our life simpler from a malpractice coverage standpoint, and we can have patients sign on that they understand that that's where the encounter is at in case they want to sue about it.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think I don't have it in front of me, and I know it's a bit of a longer bit of legislation, but I actually think that what you're talking about is potentially included in House Bill 4. Like I said, it's kind of a gathering of a lot of the different waivers and allowances like that that were allowed during COVID. I can't remember if that's in there or not, but I do know that the issue is one that's come up in the past. So it's something certainly. Let me kind of follow up with you, Dr. Loftus.
Yeah, because other states are doing this already. So like the Cleveland Clinic is advertising for Texans to do virtual with them. And at this point, it would be illegal for us to advertise to do virtual with their patients as soon as the COVID restrictions end.
Yeah. Yeah.